Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror thriller film called 9 Dead. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens in Los Angeles, where a mysterious person carefully prepares an arsenal of weapons, implying that he's planning something sinister. The scene then cuts to a nightclub where the owner Sully is seen lashing out at a stripper for taking a break. Moments later, he leaves the nightclub to go home, but all of a sudden, a masked person paralyzes and kidnaps him. Sometime later, we meet a police officer named Jackson, who's hanging out with his colleague. He's also kidnapped by the same masked figure who sprays tear gas into his colleague's eyes before escaping. Another man named Coogan is in a cafe nearby, watching the news about a series of kidnappings in the city. Word travels fast. He gets worried and leaves the cafe, only to sense someone following him. Coogan pulls out a knife to defend himself, but the stranger quickly paralyzes him with an electric shock and drags him away. The next victim is a young man named Christian, who is seen leaving a bar late at night. Then we meet Kelly Murphy, who is also kidnapped by the stranger after being paralyzed by an electric shock. In the next scene, we see all the kidnapped victims in the same room. Could have just started the movie here, I think. Tied to poles with bags over their heads. Moments later, the masked man switches on the lights and begins removing the bags and tape from their mouths one by one. It's revealed that there are a total of 9 captives in the room, along with the ones we have already seen. There are new victims as well, such as Leon, Eddie, a priest named Father Francis, and a Chinese woman, Chan, who cannot speak English. Almost forgot to diversify. All the victims are confused about why they're here and begin cursing at the masked man. However, the kidnapper calmly informs them that they've all been brought here for a specific reason, and it's up to them to figure out why. He warns that every 10 minutes he will return and kill one of them if they fail to uncover the truth, but if they manage to do so, he promises to release the remaining survivors and confess all of his crimes to the police. Following this, the masked man throws some chalk pieces onto the floor, activates the timer, and exits the room. One of each of the captives' hands are suddenly released, and they begin to wonder what they could have done to deserve such punishment. Eddie points at Father Francis, suggesting he might have molested a kid, but the priest insists he has never hurt anyone in his life. At this moment, Coogan confesses that he has molested a kid, which causes the others to curse and shout at him. "No one asked you, Coogan!" Next, Eddie picks up a piece of chalk and begins writing on the wall while everyone introduces themselves one by one. Kelly reveals that she's a district attorney and has sent many criminals to jail, and one of them could be seeking revenge. Moments later, Christian recognizes Sully and recalls doing business with him a few years ago. It turns out Sully is a loan shark who had given Christian $5,000 for drugs. Christian was arrested while trying to sell the drugs and served 3 years in prison, but when he got out, he eventually returned Sully's money, since the man had a very fearsome reputation. However, Christian reveals that he has left that life behind and is now pursuing a career in Hollywood while working as a bartender. Soon the timer runs out, and the masked man enters the room demanding to know if they've figured out why they're here. Kelly pleads for more time, but he ignores her and approaches Christian to whisper something into his ear. The shocked boy says he could never have figured it out before the masked man brutally shoots him to death. Everyone screams in terror as the kidnapper drags out the body, closes the door, and restarts the timer. Next, the captives begin bickering among themselves and urge each other to confess their sins. Suddenly, Coogan reveals that he was just released after 5 years in prison. He served a shorter sentence because the authorities couldn't find the body of the child, leaving everyone horrified and disgusted. Kelly then asks Leon about his background, and he admits that he used to rob with his brother. It shocks everyone, but he justifies himself, saying that at least he never killed anyone or touched kids. After this, Eddie opens up about himself and reveals that he is a health insurance executive. He claims to be a good person who has never done anything wrong in his life. Tell that to Luigi. He reveals that his company conducts experimental medical trials, and a couple of years ago, his brother-in-law was diagnosed with colon cancer. Eddie admits that he helped his brother-in-law get treatment by falsifying some documents, but he doesn't understand why he would be punished for simply trying to help his family. Later, the group notices that Kelly and Jackson know each other and demand to know the nature of their relationship. Kelly reveals that they had an affair, but Jackson's wife caught them, after which she divorced him and went to Arizona with the kids. The group theorizes that perhaps it's his ex-wife seeking revenge, but Jackson disagrees since he sends her a large sum of money every month. Next, Leon comes up with an idea and asks Sully, who is next to him, to kick his arm so he can get out of the handcuffs. Sully, who enjoys beating people up, agrees without hesitation and begins kicking him. The plan works smoothly and Leon manages to free his hand, which excites everyone. Jackson then tells them to hide behind the door and attack the killer when he enters. However, Leon refuses to help anyone and flips them off before heading outside alone, but he doesn't get very far because he encounters the kidnapper, who has been watching everything on camera. They engage in an intense fight, but Leon manages to overpower him and even grabs his gun. He holds the killer at gunpoint, but the latter calmly reveals that he has been planning this for 2 years and nothing will stop him. If he really means that, he should have locked the door. It turns out that Leon's gun isn't loaded, and when he tries to run, the kidnapper shoots him, leaving him badly injured. Moments later, the other captives watch in horror as the masked man drags the wounded Leon back into the cell and cuffs him again. He once again demands to know why they are there, but nobody has any idea. As the killer approaches Coogan with a gun, the latter asks him to move the others out of the way of the blood splatter, since he doesn't want them to die so soon. The kidnapper whispers something in his ear, and Coogan agrees that it is indeed a good reason. Why don't they yell it to the others? He then attempts to choke the masked man, but the latter easily overpowers him and shoots him in the heart. As he drags Coogan's lifeless body out of the room, he warns Leon that he'll be the next victim. Moments later, the timer restarts once again, and the group's anxiety deepens as they still have no idea why they are here. A sudden glimmer of hope appears when Chan recognizes Kelly and begins speaking in Mandarin, but since nobody understands her, Chan uses the chalk to draw something and even says bang bang. The group wonders how Chan could possibly be horny at a time like this. At this moment, Kelly finally recognizes her and asks if her name is Nung Chan, to which the woman confirms. It turns out that a few years ago, Kelly had handled a robbery case involving a liquor store owned by Chan. The elderly woman identified the criminal, a 20-year-old named Wade Greeley, whom Kelly had sent behind bars. However, they still can't connect the whole thing, as all they have is the robbery and the name. With only 2 minutes remaining, Leon decides to confess and admits that he lied when he said he hadn't killed anyone. It turns out he killed his own brother after a betrayal in business and sold all their guns afterwards. A remorseful Leon now begs for forgiveness, and the priest tells him he who seeks forgiveness shall find it. Bleeding from his wound, Leon recalls the kidnapper's wounds, that he had been planning this for 2 years. This gives the group some hope, and they try to remember what they were doing at that time. Moments later, the door opens, and when the killer realizes they still don't have an answer, he shoots Leon and drags him away. Amid the chaos and confusion, Father Francis suddenly reveals that he knows why they are here, but he cannot disclose it. It is because he heard it in confession, and his relationship with God is more important to him than his own life. Sully tries to persuade the man, and Kelly even threatens to kill him, but Father Francis still refuses to say anything. Eddie suggests that they might have to figure it out without the priest and asks everyone to open up about their darkest secrets. The group begins revealing some horrible things they've done, but Father Francis makes it clear that they're going in the wrong direction. He gives hints and reveals that Wade Greeley was not involved in the robbery. Kelly argues that it's not true since Chan was an eyewitness, and they also had solid evidence. However, Eddie guesses that someone in the room confessed to the priest, and he assumes it was Christian. It's right there in the name, you see. The priest confirms it, and in a shocking twist, they figure out that Christian was the one who robbed the store to pay his debt to Sully. This enrages Sully, who finds it ridiculous that he has to die just because he loaned some kid $5,000. After the 10 minutes are up, the killer arrives, and Sully begins shouting about being punished over such a minor issue. He challenges the killer to shoot him, but the man ignores him and turns to Eddie instead. But just as he pulls the trigger, Father Francis suddenly shields Eddie and is shot in his place. As the killer drags the priest's body away, Kelly tries to reason with him and even calls him by the name Wade. The man pauses and reveals that he is not Wade before he leaves the room. As the timer restarts, Jackson suggests that the man might be someone close to Wade, like a friend or a family member, but Kelly counters that there was no one present at his trial, and she doesn't recall anyone anyway, since it was a long time ago. However, it turns out that Wade went to jail 5 years ago, which Jackson finds odd because the killer has been planning this for only 2 years. At this moment, Sully has a realization and recalls how Christian claimed that he had nothing when he was released from jail, but it would be impossible for him to have mentioned the liquor store heist without a weapon. He recalls Leon saying he sold the guns after killing his brother and suspects that he was the one who sold the gun to Christian. That explains why the rest of them are all in the cell, but they still can't figure out how Coogan, Eddie, and Jackson are connected to this. Soon, the timer runs out again, and the killer enters the room. He hands Chan a piece of paper with writing in Mandarin, and she finally understands the reasoning behind everything. The terrified woman falls to her knees, crying and desperately apologizing, but the man shows her no mercy and brutally shoots her to death. This terrifies Kelly, who pleads with the killer to release her, saying she has a son who needs his mother. However, the killer asks when she last spent time with her son, who is mostly cared for by a nanny. He tells her not to use her child as an excuse, then abruptly turns to Jackson, saying that this should enrage him as well. After the killer leaves, a confused Jackson asks what the hell that means, and it turns out he is actually the father of Kelly's son. He becomes furious that she kept such information from him. He even calls her a selfish and immoral woman who is probably hiding something big. Kelly hesitates and says she would be as good as dead if this information came out, but finally agrees to reveal the truth. She admits that back then, Wade was picked up not far from the liquor store and matched Chan's description. However, she didn't have any solid evidence, and she really needed a victory after losing case after case. She was the lowest performing attorney at the time, and no one used to take her seriously. So, to keep her job, she decided to frame Wade, and it turns out Chan had grabbed some of Christian's hair in the struggle. Kelly then stole some hair from Wade's comb, after which she decided to use her lover, Jackson. She sneaked into the evidence room because of his access and switched the hair sample. This means Jackson unknowingly helped her falsify evidence, which caused the poor kid to go to prison. Upon hearing this, everyone is disgusted by her actions, but Kelly says this can never come out, as she would go to prison and lose her job and her child. The group begins to theorize that the killer must be Wade's father, who is seeking revenge for his son. They start speculating about what happened to Wade after he went to prison, and assume that he must have crossed paths with Coogan, who was also convicted 5 years ago. But with the timer rapidly counting down, they still can't figure out Eddie's connection to the whole story. Moments later, the killer enters the room, and when they fail to provide a complete answer, he ruthlessly kills Sully. After the man leaves, only Kelly, Jackson, and Eddie remain, and they are extremely anxious and terrified. Eddie then recalls how before Coogan died, he was asking the killer not to splatter his blood on anyone, fearing it might lead to their deaths. Eddie then theorizes that Coogan must have had AIDS, and perhaps met Wade in prison, where he assaulted the young man and infected him. The other two dismiss this theory as nonsense, but Eddie explains that his company was conducting drug therapy trials to prolong the lives of AIDS patients around the time Wade left prison. Part of Eddie's job involved rejecting candidates, and according to company policy, he used to turn down people with criminal records, the wrong age, improper insurance, or insufficient funds. Eddie admits that he may have been the one who rejected Wade's application because of his criminal record. This is why Wade's father began plotting revenge 2 years ago, as that was the time his son died. Moments later, the killer once again enters the room and asks if they have discovered the truth. Eddie proceeds to tell him everything they've figured out, after which the man removes his mask. He reveals that his son was a very brave boy, and that each person in the room could have prevented his death. The old man tells them to remember what they did and the consequences of their actions for the rest of their lives. Next, the old man gives Kelly the key to free herself and the others, saying that the cops are on the way. But after uncuffing herself, Kelly suddenly attacks him and steals his gun. She reveals that if the truth comes out, her life will be ruined, and she cannot allow that to happen. She shoots the old man, then immediately fires at Eddie and Jackson, leading to their deaths. However, it is revealed that the old man is still alive thanks to his bulletproof vest. He tells Kelly that everyone has been watching the footage and will now see who the real Kelly Murphy is, but she doesn't care and shoots him straight in the head. In the final scene, Kelly leaves the cell just as the cops arrive at the building. She manages to sneak away from them, but it's clear she won't be able to escape the consequences, as the entire ordeal has already been broadcast to the public.